Hello, assassins and antagonists. My name's TV Skyn. And you know what we haven't done in, like, a while? Just a straight-up writing critique. Just like, taking a look at some of the lore that's being put out for a video game, like, for example, League of Legends, and just critiquing it, seeing, like, okay, how well is this written? How does it express the characters? Like, all of that good stuff. Fortunately, a nice little short story has dropped straight into our laps, into which we may sink our merciless knives. The Name of the Blade by Ian St. Martin, which has the rare distinction of also being lore for Talon. You know, Talon. A character who exists in League of Legends, although you wouldn't know it by the complete lack of lore or stories or anything that's ever told about him ever at any point. Like, he got a bio update a while back with his rework, and then... Anyway, Talon has lore now. That's fantastic, so let's dive into what kind of lore this is. And before we begin, something I should stress, something I should remember to stress always with videos like this is what we're doing here is not me coming in and saying, aha, this writer, oh, this professional, apparently, doesn't know how to write properly, and I, with my superior knowledge, am here to correct their silly little mistakes because I am the god of writing, and all must conform to my standards. That's not what we're doing here. There is no one right way to write. There is only, like, ways in which to perceive it and ways in which to think about it. What I do here is I try to do an editorial pass, as it were, on the writing. Is like, here's some ways in which I think this could be improved, ways in which it could work better, things that I don't think work about it, but I'm not trying to name myself the supreme authority of all writing quality ever, or trying to tell anyone that they're not allowed to like the writing just the way that it is. Just want to get that out up front. The ways in which videos like this are useful, like the thing that they're supposed to offer to other people is, okay, here's someone giving a critical perspective on the way this is written. Maybe some of that is applicable to the ways that I write, or the ways that I think about writing. Maybe he makes some good points, or maybe he makes some bad points. Maybe I disagree with him, and my disagreement can then form the basis of a better understanding of what I believe about writing and about how this stuff works. That's what we're doing here, and I know that's a very long intro to a video that's just about some frickin' PR extra material for a video game, but still, I sometimes in these videos I can come across as like a opinionated elitist dickhead with very specific opinions about what all writing should be, and any writing that falls short of my expectations is bad, so I'm gonna try to avoid that. Anyway, let's get into it. This is a fairly short story, which is appropriate, so we'll just read through the whole thing together, and I'll frame my criticism as we go along. For example, there's copper in the air. The tang of fresh blood rises up to me, my back pressed into the shadows while I study her as she kills. She was driven here, a large chamber decoratively appointed, 2 exits, but through the white halls and high-arched ceilings it was easy enough for me to follow her and do it in silence. Her pursuers did not. A charging crash of weapons and armor brought to bear against her. To the uninitiated she appears trapped, and a cornered assassin is a dead one, but I know well that her blades are but one of her weapons, and far from her keenest. I recognize the hidden pattern of her strikes, thought translating seamlessly into action. The subtle movements masked by grand gestures as she adapts to exploit every weakness presented to her. I know the teachings that inform her violence, because they were taught to me as well. Wisdom passed down to only a handful, forging a family of purpose, if not of blood. It is her birthright, while for me it was earned in darkened alleyways and the frothing chokes of slit throats. I see her follow the principles of our teachings, and then I see her break them. So, assuming that you know nothing about Talon whatsoever, that you've never played him, you have never listened to his voice lines, you have never read his bio or anything, what kind of person would you assume that he is based on this? Because what we have here is a first-person narrative. This is Talon speaking from inside his own mind, describing the world through his own experience. He's not performing for anyone. He's not like putting on an act or an affect or doing anything that relates to anyone else. He's talking essentially to himself, as it were, and we get to read that inner monologue as the readers. And this is a framing device that's great for giving a reader access to the innermost workings of a character's mind, which gives you a lot of opportunities to character build for them. Like, exactly, okay, how do they think about things? How do they see the world? How do they talk to themselves when no one else is listening? What is their inner voice? So based on this, what kind of inner voice do you feel like Talon has? Like, what kind of person is he deep inside? What kind of language does he use to describe the world? The stuff I notice is things like, I know the teachings that inform her violence, or forging a family of purpose, if not of blood. It is her birthright, while for me it was earned in darkened alleyways and the frothing chokes of slit throats. The impression I get from this language is one of sort of an attempt at heightened, slightly poetic language, an attempt at creating clever turns of phrase and being, well, you know, like an attempt at doing what you might call good, clever writing. And that sounds like a compliment, because it kind of is, but here's the question. Does that fit the character of Talon? Now, you might say, well, I mean, you can listen to his voice lines, and his voice lines are just mostly kind of him growling threats about how he's going to murder people. But when we think about the character that Talon is, because Talon here is an orphan who was raised on the streets of Noxus, pretty much killing from day one, like fighting to survive just from the very start of things, who got so good at killing that the assassin guilds were like, okay, you need to come work for us or else we have to kill you. And so he started killing all the assassins until one assassin was better than him. That was General Ducouteau. I'm pronouncing it in vaguely French because I think that's what you're supposed to do, who is Katarina's father. And Talon goes, okay, well, you're strong enough to beat me, so I'll come work for you, and gains a lot of affection and respect for the man, until the man eventually disappears, and that's a whole mystery thing that he's obsessed with solving, although we've had no story that ever explored any of that. That's the kind of man Talon is, like this orphan raised on the streets, who only really knows killing, who only really knows how to kill, doesn't really have anything else in his life. Is this the kind of language that that character would use? Is this the kind of way that this character would speak? And for me, the answer is no. Like, for me, Talon, as a character, the thing that makes him distinct from characters like Katarina, from like the highborn, fanciful, rich nobleman, is that he's from the streets. Like, he was raised on the streets of Noxus. That's where he had his childhood. That was where he learned his craft. That's where he became who he is. And this language kind of doesn't fit that. And that's like, okay, so maybe he has an internal monologue that's distinct from the place that he was raised. Maybe, over the course of service to General Ducouteau, he has learned to speak in this sort of heightened way, except he's not talking to anyone. He's not performing the outward appearance of being associated with a noble house for anyone except himself. So, okay, maybe it's self-deception. Maybe he's trying to pretend to himself that he's higher born than he is. Well, sure, but that's when you run into the problem with Talon, which is that there's no bloody lore for the guy. Like, we have nothing else to compare it to let us know whether that's the case. And the reason why I'm so fixated on this is because the whole point of this story is Talon is, as we've seen so far, Talon is quietly observing Katarina as she's working her way through murdering, like, just a whole bunch of people for an unspecified... She's just murdering a whole bunch of people who are chasing her down and trying to kill her, and she's better than them, so she murders them. And he's sitting in the shadows, observing her and judging her. And the reason why he's sitting in the shadows, observing her and judging her, happens a little bit later down the line. So let's read through it a little bit more. Her target appears, and she allows them to see her before the strike comes. There's flourish to the killing, noise, arrogance, wasted energy. Each choice exposes her more, cracking her armor wider, betraying her lineage. My upper lip constricts, desperate to twitch, but I am stone. Succumbing to such weakness would only carry me further from the edge. Talon, literal edgelord. And take note of this. Just keep that in mind. There's flourish to the killing, noise, arrogance, wasted energy. Each choice exposes her more, cracking her armor wider. Talon has disdain for the way that Katarina carries herself because she spends way too much energy, like, looking cool and flourishing and, like, reveling in the fight and being emotional. He doesn't like that at all. I've seen such ambition before. As a child in the world beneath the Empire, I watched the ambitious rise head and shoulders above their fellows, just high enough for all to see them, standing out from the masses, and then I watched the masses butcher them for it. I learned the sanctuary of shadow quickly, the shield that silence can be, and never forgetting that has kept me alive. I watch her defy them both, blundering to the precipice of failure, and it would not be her first time. I remember. And then we get a shift. It's emphasized with the shift into cursive, which is a very effective way to show, okay, we're going deeper into memory here. This is a flashback that's happening, basically. And so the story that he tells here is the story of how Katarina got the scar across her eye, because that was from a time when Talon attempted to murder Katarina. And the reason Talon attempted to murder Katarina is because Katarina had been an arrogant assassin, had done a dumb thing and killed the wrong guy, and therefore the Noxian High Command was like, well, Katarina has to die now as punishment for being a bad assassin. And Talon is the one who's sent to kill her, and he fails. He can't kill her, because even though she makes all of these mistakes that he perceives, and even though she's so reckless and overconfident and arrogant, he can't actually land the fatal blow on her. She just barely manages to get out of the way all the time, and that bothers him. Oh, he doesn't like that at all, and that's the reason why he's become obsessed with her, why he's following her around, watching her kill, because he has some, let's not call it affection, but it's certainly an obsession with her. What's the nature of his disdain for Katarina? And this is where we return up here. There. There is flourish to the killing, noise, arrogance, wasted energy. Each choice exposes her more, cracking her armor wider, betraying her lineage. My upper lip constricts, desperate to twitch, but I am stone. Succumbing to such weakness would only carry me further from the edge. We'll explain what the edge is a little bit later. So Talon's complaint with Katarina is that she's too passionate, she's too arrogant, she cares too much about appearances, she cares too much about enjoying the kill, which is very much part of Katarina's story. Like, if you read her lore and backstory and stuff like that, that's exactly the kind of passionate behavior that gets her into trouble. He doesn't like that she cares too much about appearances, that she wastes her energy, that she does too much pointlessly, flourishes, fancifulness. But here's the thing. If Talon was a single-minded cold killer who's like, no wasted energy, we're not wasting any time here, we're not spending time with anything that's frivolous or unnecessary, why would he say something like, wisdom passed down to only a handful, forging a family of purpose if not of blood? Like, this is not efficient language. This is not the language of someone who disdains flourishes and fancifulness. This is the language of someone who's reaching for the poetic, for the excessive, using too many words to describe things that could be described in much shorter terms if you just cut out all the poetic description of it. The frothing chokes of slit throats. Like, it is her birthright, while for me it was earned in darkened alleyways. And also, stuff that's, I learned the sanctuary of shadow quickly. The shield that silence, the simile, the shield that silence can be, and never forgetting that has kept me alive. I watch her defy them both, blundering to the precipice of failure, and it would not be the first time. Like, this language is not the language of someone who feels the primary virtue in themselves that they are stone, that they don't do anything excessive, they don't waste energy, they don't make an unnecessary move, they don't, go too far in the service of anything. And that, to me, feels very incongruous, because the contrast the story is trying to establish here is that Talon is Captain Dispassionate, Mr. No Emotions, like that broody edgelord who doesn't say anything and is just teleports behind you and goes, nothing personnel, kid, and that's the extent of his dialogue. That kind of guy. Versus Katarina, who's loud and boisterous and brash and arrogant, but also has the skills to back that arrogance up. Like that odd couple clash dynamic. That's what the story is trying to establish. But the language, at least to me, doesn't support that contrast, because Talon, in his language, is doing exactly the same thing that Katarina is doing in her fighting. Now, that can be an interesting point to make. That can be, Talon is a freaking hypocrite. In his head, he's every bit the exaggerated, over-expressive braggart and show off that she is, except he does it with language inside his own head, inside his own grandiose delusions about how much better he is than everyone else. That could work, kinda. But the problem is, okay, if this is a delusion, if he's trying to fool himself into thinking that he's more stoic than he really is, the way to express that would be to have the mask crack and not have the mask be off the whole time, because he starts in heightened poetic language mode, and he never leaves it. So there's never a moment where we go, oh, I see. We're a bit of a hypocrite there, Talon, because you're doing the thing that you think that she's stupid for doing. Aha. Because, no, he's just in that mode the whole time. What I'm talking about here is, what if the story, instead of this heightened language from the start, had begun with just completely economic language? Like, instead of, there is copper in the air, the tang of fresh blood rises up to me, my back pressed into the shadows while I study her as she kills. It was like, I smell blood. I am hidden. I observe her. Just like, instead of all of this, just 3 sentences that communicate the same information, but without all of this extra embellishment. And that you keep to that scheme for most of the story, like with him just using minimal, really just kind of sparse, undescriptive language until he gets upset, like until his passions start to rise, until he lapses into memory. And then in his memory, he can't help but make the language more expressive, more descriptive. He can't help but get caught up in the emotions. Then I think you have a point. Then I think you have a characterization of him that kind of, oh, that's like where I would have gone, oh, that's clever, because like, as his mindset shifts, he can't help but make the same mistakes that she does because they are more alike than he thinks, and that makes a greater character dynamic. That would be so cool. But because it's just constantly there all the time, and his language use doesn't even change when he slips into solipsism and memory, the language just doesn't do anything to help the story, in my opinion. In fact, it undercuts some of the points that the story is trying to make about who he is as a character. And I think there are ways to make it work, but the story isn't doing it. Like, to me, it really isn't communicating who Talon is as a character. Like, even if it's, like, whatever character it's trying to communicate about Talon, it's incongruous. It doesn't work for me. And that's the kind of thing that you could solve by providing more stories from Talon's perspective that we can compare things against and see, oh, okay, so there's a consistency in his and maybe he talks out loud only in short bursts of phrases and sentences, but inside his head, he can't help but be verbose. But none of that is in this story, and that's one of the limitations that's always present with Riot's lore output is, well, it's just like most characters just don't have nearly enough to have a consistent, interesting characterization. There just isn't enough of it. We need more in order to have them have, like, character arcs or actual stories told about them. Which is some of the stuff that they're maybe trying to fix with the indie games that they're putting out, The Ruined King and Convergence, which maybe will give that fuller character arc to characters like Echo, Senna, and Lucian, which I'm hoping for. Like, Senna and Lucian already have pretty solid character arcs, honestly, in the media that exists, but it's the kind of thing that you can see here with Talon. He really needs that, because absent supporting information that might make this more, as big air quotes, justified, this just doesn't work for me. Anyway, I learned the sanctuary of shadow quickly, the shield that silence can be, and never forgetting that has kept me alive. I watch her defy them both, blundering to the precipice of failure, and it would not be the first time. I remember. The cold of the forest, the glittering frost on the branch where I perched, watching, waiting for her to appear. When she did, she was wreathed in the ashen smell of the battle, cooling just beyond our view. It clung to her as surely as her failure. Again, super heightened poetic language, and if that poetic language hadn't come in had come in here, when he slips into memory, that would have been so good. Like, that contrast would have been such a strong point of characterization. Anyway, there's always a price for failure. That day, for her, I had been made that price. And this one, I can see what they're going for. There's a price for failure, and I'm here to kill her to extract. That's the price of her failure, is that she has to die, and I'm the one who's here to kill her. That's what they're trying to say. But there's always a price for failure. That day, for her, I had been made that price. It's really ambiguous. Like, it's kind of says like she owned him, and then because she failed, she had to pay him to, like, as though he's the price that she pays, in the sense that she possesses him somehow, and now she has to give him up. And that's just very like the point it's trying to make is that I am the one who's here to exact the price of your failure. But just in terms of sentence construction, I just don't think that comes across at all. Anyway, I planned it all perfectly. I wouldn't allow myself anything less. The slope of the ground, the strength and the direction of the wind whistling through her trees, her bearing, her garb, her weapons, and her gait. The small, clean blade held in fingers etched with 1,000 tiny scars of imperfection. That one... 1,000 tiny scars of imperfection. Why is it important that we know that his fingers have 1,000 tiny scars of imperfection? Well, there's a callback to it later. My fingers are pebbled with 1,000 scars, each a single tiny step on my path toward the edge, that unattainable perfect state that I strive for. So it's setting up this callback down here. But again, it's a thing where, like, I just don't think it really works. Because at this point in the story, when we're reading this, like, when you have this thing that is only comprehensible, really, once you have read through the entire rest of the book, or the entire rest of the story, that's like, for now, right now, my state as a reader is, what the fuck does that mean? What does that, 1,000 tiny scars of imperfection, why does that matter? Well, that becomes clear later on down the line, but right now it's just a confusing detail that doesn't do anything for the immediate action, and so I would have left that out. It all passed through my mind before I was free to unfold, to strike. There was no sound when I descended. My blade cut air, was interrupted, air again. Blood trailed behind its path, a sluggish bloom of darkest red, uncurled into icy air. My momentum carried me past her, as I planned. I looked back, my mind calm. What trophy would be proof enough? Her blades, a lock of hair, her eyes. I turned and saw her standing. She clutched her left eye, blood squirting between fingers, but she didn't fall. My stomach tightened. A bead of sweat trickled down my ribs despite the cold. She was supposed to fall after the strike. The one strike. She should not be alive. I told her so. The word did not fell her, so I said them again. I screamed them at her. She answered with the edges of her blades. We fought, or rather she fought. She was a blur of red hair and flashing silver, her cuts and slashes propelled by pain, skill, and rage in equal measure. Anger twisted her features, keeping the wound I gave her from closing. I flowed around her, cold and colorless against her passion. 3 times she came close to opening me to the bone, to emptying my lifeblood upon the frosted earth of the forest floor. But emotion betrayed the blows early enough for me to displace myself. The instinct was there, but she did not plan the engagement, and so I kept my blood within... Okay. This is just very clunky. Like, very... 3 times she came close to opening me to the bone, to emptying my lifeblood upon the frosted earth of the forest floor. But emotion betrayed the blows early enough for me to displace myself. That's like, even if you're going for heightened poetic language, that's just like a lot between periods. 3 times she came close to opening me to the bone, to emptying my lifeblood upon the frosted earth of the forest floor. Like, at this point, we know it's winter, we know it's cold, we know you're in a forest, you have already established all of this. And also, if she's opening you to the bone, then you don't have to say that, oh yeah, by the way, after she has cut me open to the bone, I am also going to bleed. No, like, this... And again, when you're dealing with poetic language, sometimes you restate the obvious, or you restate a point multiple times for emphasis, but here's like, at this point, it becomes just way too much. And also, but emotion betrayed the blows early enough for me to displace myself, is like, still, even within, like, but her emotion made the blows fly wide. Like, you can do something to just cut it down a little bit. And the cherry on the top of the cake of this very clunky paragraph, the instinct was there, but she did not plan the engagement, and so I kept my blood within me. Which is like, okay, so you said, emotion betrayed the blows early enough for me to displace myself. I dodged it, therefore I didn't get cut. The instinct was there, but she did not plan the engagement. You've just said emotion betrayed the blows, like she acted rashly rather than planning. So you've just said this whole thing again. And then you say again, because she was too emotional, I didn't get cut. Because she was too emotional, I didn't get cut. And it's like, and also just, this is just such an awkward ending to a phrase, isn't it? Like, and so I kept my blood within me. First of all, it's so bloody. Yes, of course, if you don't get cut, you don't bleed. That's like, that's why it's clunky. It feels a little bit... I'm searching for the right word to describe it here, because the word I'm constantly going to is condescending. Like, it's almost like it's trying to explain it to me like I'm a small child. Did you understand the part where, like, he's not bleeding because he didn't get cut because she was, like, too wild and he could die? Did you get it? Did you... Like, that's what it feels like to me, is like this... the writing doesn't trust me to understand what it is saying. And I don't like that feeling as a reader. Like, I don't like the feeling that the author's going, I'm not sure they'll get it. I should probably describe it like 4 or 5 more times. Because that to me tells me, okay, but if you're not sure that we've gotten it, that's because you haven't written it well enough yet. Like, that's because you haven't taken enough passes over it to try and refine it so that it's clear. And like, that's what it feels like to me. I glimpsed an opening once where I could have ended her. She would have fallen for true this time. Nobody would have known of my mistake, nobody but me. I saw the opening, but I let it pass me by. After my failed strike, I would not try a second, and should I have fallen to her, it was deserved. I was now no different than she was. She watched me as I put my blade away, and she stopped. She touched her face again, tracing a wound that would never leave her. Breath feathered out from the cold, angry slashes from her nose as she spoke. Angry slashes from her nose? So the trouble I have with this one is I don't know what this is meant to describe. Like, breath feathered out from the cold, angry slashes from her nose as she spoke. So she's blowing out little plumes of steam from her nose, I guess. But like, slashes? Would that... How hard do you have to blow in order for the steam that comes out of your nose to look like a slash and not a billowing cloud? The imagery to me is a little bit unclear. Her own failure that brought me here loomed over her, and she was resolved to set it right, to atone for it. I could not bring myself to stand in her way, not anymore. The hypocrisy would be too great. My duty was to return and face judgment and see what price I had to pay. And this... Again, I get what they're going for here, is that Talon has this obsession with perfection. He, like, as he says, he seeks the edge, like that unattainable perfect state of perfect control over himself and perfect control over his body and just perfect precision. And because, like, he glimpses an opening once where he could have ended her. She would have fallen for true this time. But he doesn't do it. And then the rest of this is dedicated to, like, going through Talon's mental process of, because I didn't take this opening, I'm like, oh, well, now I'm a hypocrite like her, and now I don't have the right to kill her, and now, like, all of his personal moral principles kind of kick into gear and prevent him from finishing the job. But that, to me, is, like, the wrong proportion here. I saw the opening, but let it pass me by. Well, hang on. You had an opening to kill Katarina? Like, and letting this pass you by, like... The character as described to us, this obsession with perfection, this obsessive nature, and this relentless pursuit of getting things right. What he's just told me is, though, oh yeah, I made a mistake. And then he doesn't dwell on it at all. And what I would have liked to see here is, instead of spending all of this time, like, describing sort of his internal mental monologue and his internal emotional process of going through, of dealing with the consequences of not taking the opening, I would have liked that to be spent a lot more like, almost like doing a bullet time thing where time slows down and he sees the opening and he grasps his knife and he could feel his muscles spring into action, pulling around, like, and really, really describe that in detail. That moment when he has the opening, when it's clear, when it's obvious, I've got her, I can put down a fatal wound on her, I can do this right, I can fix my mistake. And then he doesn't take it. And then rather than have this long diatribe on all of this, just go, I couldn't take the strike because, that would make me a hypocrite. Like just leave the emotional stuff to one short sentence, because that's all we need to understand. At this point, After all of this, Talon has been introduced to us. We understand who he is as a character. You don't need to dwell even more on his obsession with perfection. What you should dwell on instead is the because it's such an important emotional moment, it's the moment when he decides to fail. He makes an active decision to fail. That's a big deal for him. That moment should be emphasized, not all of that stuff. Anyway, my duty was to return and face judgment and see what price I had to pay. Before turning back toward the battlefield, leaving the way she came, she asked me who I was. She did not ask if her father sent me. That much was clear to her, all but the name of the blade he sent. I did not have an answer for her. My name had never mattered. I told her so, but saw she would not relent. I thought back, remembering the world under the Empire then. Down there, in those final blood-soaked days before I left it all behind, they called me Talon. Like, again, this whole thing of Katarina demanding to know his name and things like that is like, that feels a lot less important than the moment when he decides to fail. And so that kind of doesn't work for me. Blood spreads out across the stones from her target. Now her kill. I watch her make quick work of the soldiers who remain to challenge her. I imagine myself in the place of the last of them, seeing the openings he does not, before his head rolls from his shoulders and he joins the dead. For a handful of seconds, she admires her work. She's smiling, the pale scar bisecting her left eye flexing. The smile goes cold. Does she sense me? Before she disappears down the corridor like smoke. I wait a moment, too, and then I allow myself to breathe again. Muscles clamped tight for hours loosen a fraction. Only now, with her gone, do I produce the knife. My fingers are pebbled with 1,000 scars, each a single tiny step on my path towards the edge. I just... Knowing what an edgelord Talon is, it's just relentlessly funny to me that he calls his perfect imaginary mental state the edge. It's like, oh, you adorable little edge boy, you. That unattainable perfect state I strive for. I spin the knife in a quick, practiced orbit, then again, and again. The blade is clean. The blood that once graced it on that day long since crumbled away. Waiting for the day The blood that once graced it on that day, waiting for the day, I might be made the price for her failure again. Again, doing a callback to the thing of him being the price of her failure. It didn't work the first time, and therefore I don't think it works the second time, but anyway, I call it Katarina. Ooh, you named the knife that you want to kill her with after her. Like, this is where I want to give the story a compliment. Like, that right there, that is some primo fanfiction bait. Like, that's, ooh, that, right, yeah. Like, she remembers him because he gave her one of the only wounds that she has. Like, he was so close to killing her that one time, the assassin that her father sent after her. Oh, there's some emotion there, there's some angst, there's a character dynamic there. And Talon has literally named one of his knives after her, which is, like, such a lovely little, like, that's the kind of thing this obsessive idiot edgelord assassin boy would do, isn't it? Like the kind of overwrought, silly gesture that doesn't register to him at all as being silly. Like he thinks it's meaningful, but it's actually just kind of cringeworthy. But like that's not bad. That's a good thing because that's character dynamic. That's giving us something to work with when it comes to imagining how would these two characters interact, how much rabid sexual tension would there be if they had like a long extended duel on top of a bridge or something like that. Ooh, that is good fanfiction bait right there. It's silly, but it's good. I just wish, like, speaking of which though, I do wish, like, because the one time these two characters interact as anything other than combatants is here, when she tells him to tell her his name. And I do wish that there had been, like, in this moment, like, the smile goes cold, does she sense me, before she disappears down the corridor like smoke. I do wish it would have been, like, where if she had looked back at him and winked, like, I knew you were there the whole time kind of thing, to embarrass him again and fluster him, or some indication that she knows that he's there and watching, and maybe she's showing off for him just to show how much better of an assassin. Like, there was an opportunity there for more character interaction that I think would have made the story more compelling, because as it is, all we have right now is, like, this is a creepy dude, like, stalking a girl for a while. That there's a girl he hasn't been able to get over, and so he spends, like, several hours just stuck, just looking at her. I like watching her sleep, which doesn't really make him that cool. And because there's no interaction between the two characters, it's like, I feel there's a missed opportunity for sparks flying. But anyway, that was a hell of a lot of criticism. Now, like I said at the start of this video, and I'm going to emphasize it again, this is not a, oh, I am right, the writer is wrong, they should do what I say, because otherwise all of their stories are going to be shit forever. That is not the point of this video. The point is to present a critical perspective on the thing that can inform, well, I mean, probably, I don't know if Ian St. Martin, who I've never really talked to or anything, I don't know if he's going to watch this video, and if he did, thanks for sticking through it for so long while I was being so mean about your writing. I hope you don't think too poorly of me. But it's not really the point. I don't necessarily want Ian St. Martin to go back and, oh, he's right, everything about the story is wrong, I must change it. For me, this is an exercise for myself in like, okay, here's one attempt to do the story. And as you could tell from the way I described it, is like I was going through it and okay, if I was to write this, if I was to try and improve this to make this more compelling from my perspective, what would I do, right? And that's what I was trying to do. And what's hopefully helpful about it is that you can have that thought process yourself and say, hey, he was right about that thing. I should probably do that if I write a story that's similar to this. Or no, I think actually Ian St. Martin did this really well, and I'm gonna take inspiration. Like, that's the point of this. Again, it's not a right or wrong, I am the god of writing, all mortals must bow before me kind of thing. Just want to emphasize that, because, God, I don't want to see that stuff in the comments, please. It's a very toxic... Because there have been times previously when I've done these writing critiques when people have been in the comments like, yeah, tear those guys apart. They're shitty writers and they don't know what they're doing. You should write for writers. It's like, no. That's not the point. Please don't take that away from this video. Like, that kind of really bothers me, which is why I've been obsessing over it so much. Anyway, if you've enjoyed this video somehow, I would appreciate it if you clicked the like, comment, and or subscribe buttons, maybe also the bell icon. And the reason why I ask you to do that, the reason why all YouTubers ask you to do that all the time, is because YouTube doesn't just check how many views a video is getting. It also checks how many people care enough about the video to click on something. Like, that's how YouTube measures engagement on the platform, and that engagement determines, like, how many people the video gets shown to at all. So it's actually a really important metric. So if you want to help out the YouTubers who you enjoy, even if that's not me, like, clicking those buttons, it actually does help quite a bit. If you want to help me out more directly than that, though, rather than just clicking buttons, I do have a merchandise store, I have a Patreon, and I have a tip jar, all of which is linked down in the description. You can avail yourself of that if you so choose, and that direct support would be very much appreciated. If you don't want to do that, like if you don't want to help me out, that's fine, but once again, I'll encourage you, if there are YouTubers whose work you enjoy, please consider supporting them directly with whatever you can, whenever you can, because that $1 monthly donation that, like, on Patreon or whatever, that doesn't feel like very much, that is literally the same as thousands of views on a video. Like, those little contributions, that little bit of help that you can get from someone, it matters so much more than you think, especially to smaller YouTubers or people who do niche content. So if you have content creators whose work you enjoy, please consider supporting them directly. Anyway, is that everything I have to say at the end of these videos? Because that's the job of being a... No, I also have a second channel where I'm doing Let's Plays of stuff like Final Fantasy VIII right now. Also, The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask is coming up. I have a completed Let's Play of Final Fantasy VII. If you want to go through that game and see what it's like before the remake comes out. Kingdom Hearts 3, a bunch of stuff over there. I very much enjoy creating content for it. So if you want to watch some cool Let's Plays where I blabber on about art direction and writing and stuff, that's over there for you to take a look at. And if not, that's completely okay. This video is way too long already, and I'm going to end it here. Thank you very much for watching.